Section 9 of The Cricket on the Hearth by Charles Dickens. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. The Cricket on the Hearth by Charles Dickens. Caleb wondered what this meant, perceiving that she spoke to him no less than to his daughter. He saw her with astonishment, so fluttered and distressed that she could scarcely breathe, and holding to a chair to save herself from falling. "They are wheels indeed," she panted, "coming nearer, nearer, very close. And now you hear them stopping at the garden gate. And now you hear a step outside the door, the same step, Bertha, is it not? And now—" She uttered a wild cry of uncontrollable delight, and running up to Caleb, put her hands upon his eyes as a young man rushed into the room, and, flinging away his hat into the air, came sweeping down upon them. "Is it over?" cried Dot. "Yes." "Happily over?" "Yes." "Do you recollect the voice, dear Caleb? Did you ever hear the like of it before?" cried Dot. "If my boy in the golden South Americas was alive," said Caleb, trembling. "He is alive!" shrieked Dot, removing her hands from his eyes and clapping them in ecstasy. "Look at him! See where he stands before you, healthy and strong, your own dear son, your own dear, living, loving brother, Bertha!" All honour to the little creature for her transports. All honour to her tears and laughter when the three were locked in another's arms. All honour to the heartiness with which she met the sunburnt sailor fellow with his dark streaming hair half-way, and never turned her rosy little mouth aside, but suffered him to kiss it freely, and to press her to his bounding heart. And honour to the cuckoo, too, bursting out of the trap-door in the Moorish palace like a housebreaker, and hiccuping 12 times on the assembled company, as if he had got drunk for joy. The carrier, entering, started back, and well he might to find himself in such good company. "Look, John," said Caleb, exultingly. "Look here! My own boy from the golden South Americas! My own son! Him that you fitted out and sent away yourself! Him that you were always such a friend to!" The carrier advanced to seize him by the hand, but, recoiling as some feature in his face awakened a remembrance of the deaf man in the cart, said, "Edward, was it you?" "Now tell him all!" cried Dot. "Tell him all, Edward, and don't spare me, for nothing shall make me spare myself in his eyes ever again." "I was the man," said Edward. "And could you steal, disguised, into the house of your old friend?" rejoined the carrier. "There was a frank boy once. How many years is it, Caleb, since we heard that he was dead, and had it proved, we thought, who never would have done that?" "There was a generous friend of mine once, more a father to me than a friend," said Edward, "who never would have judged me, or any other man, unheard. You were he. So I am certain you will hear me now." The carrier, with a troubled glance at Dot, who still kept far away from him, replied, "Well, that's but fair. I will." "You must know that when I left here a boy," said Edward, "I was in love, and my love was returned. She was a very young girl, who perhaps, you may tell me, didn't know her own mind. But I knew mine, and I had a passion for her." "You had!" exclaimed the carrier. "You!" "Indeed I had," returned the other, "and she returned it. I have ever since believed she did, and now I am sure she did." "Heaven help me," said the carrier. "This is worse than all." "Constant to her," said Edward, "and returning, full of hope, after my hardships and perils, to redeem my part of our old contract, I heard 20 miles away that she was false to me, that she had forgotten me, and had bestowed herself upon another and a richer man. I had no mind to reproach her, but I wished to see her, and prove beyond dispute that this was true. I hoped she might have been forced into it against her own desire and recollection. It would be small comfort, but it would be some, I thought, and on I came, that I might have the truth, the real truth, observing freely for myself, and judging for myself, without obstruction on the one hand, or presenting my own influence, if I had any, before her on the other. I dressed myself unlike myself, you know how, and waited on the road, you know where. You had no suspicion of me, neither had she," pointing to Dot, "until I whispered in her ear at that fireside, and she so nearly betrayed me." "But when she knew that Edward was alive and had come back," sobbed Dot, now speaking for herself, as she had burned to do all through this narrative, "and when she knew his purpose, she advised him by all means to keep his secret close, for his old friend John Peerybingle was much too open in his nature, and too clumsy in all artifice, being a clumsy man in general," said Dot, half laughing and half crying, "to keep it for him. And when she—that's me, John," sobbed the little woman, "told him all, and how his sweetheart had believed him to be dead, and how she had at last been over-persuaded by her mother into a marriage with the silly, dear old thing called Advantageous, and when she—that's me, again, John—told him that they were not yet married, though close upon it, and that it would be nothing but a sacrifice if it went on, for there was no love on her side, and when he went nearly mad with joy to hear it, then she—that's me again— said she would go between them, as she had often done before in old times, John, and would sound his sweetheart. And be sure that what she—me again, John—said and thought was right, and it was right, John. And they were brought together, John, and they were married, John, an hour ago, and here's the bride. And Gruff and Tackleton may die a bachelor, and I'm a happy little woman, may. God bless you." She was an irresistible little woman, if that be anything to the purpose, and never so completely irresistible as in her present transports. There never were congratulations so endearing and delicious as those she lavished upon herself and on the bride. Amid the tumult of emotions in his breast, the honest carrier had stood confounded. Flying now towards her, Dot stretched out her hand to stop him, and retreated as before. "No, John, no! Hear all! Don't love me any more, John, till you've heard every word I have to say. It was wrong to have a secret from you, John. I'm very sorry. I didn't think it any harm till I came and sat down by you on the little stool last night. But when I knew, but what was written in your face, that you had seen me walking in the gallery with Edward, and when I knew what you had thought, I felt how giddy and how wrong it was. But, oh dear John, how could you think so?" Little woman, how she sobbed again. John Peerybingle would have caught her in his arms, but no, she wouldn't let him. "Don't love me yet, please, John. Not for a long time yet. When I was sad about this intended marriage, dear, it was because I remembered May and Edward such young lovers, and I knew that her heart was far away from Tackleton. You believe that now, don't you, John?" John was going to make another rush at this appeal, but she stopped him again. "No, keep there, please, John. When I laugh at you, as I sometimes do, John, and call you clumsy and a dear old goose, and names of that sort, it's because I love you, John, so well, and take such pleasure in your ways, and wouldn't see you altered in the least respect to have you made a king tomorrow." "Hurroar!" said Caleb with unusual vigour. "My opinion! And when I speak of people being middle-aged and steady, John, and pretend that we are a humdrum couple, going on in a jog-trot sort of way, it's only because I'm such a silly little thing, John, that I like sometimes to act as a kind of play with baby and all that, and make-believe." She saw that he was coming, and stopped him again, but she was very nearly too late. "No, don't love me for another minute or two, John, if you please. Wait. What I want most to tell you, I have kept to the last. My dear, good, generous John, when we were talking the other night about the cricket, I had it on my lips to say that at first I did not love you quite so dearly as I do now. When I first came home here, I was half afraid that I mightn't learn to love you every bit as well as I had hoped and prayed I might, being so very young, John. But, dear John, every day and hour I loved you more and more. And if I could have loved you better than I do, the noble words I heard you say this morning would have made me. But I can't. All the affection that I had, it was a great deal, John, I gave you, as you well deserve, long, long ago, and I have no more left to give. Now, my dear husband, take me to your heart again. That's my home, John, and never, never think of sending me to any other. You will never derive so much delight from seeing a glorious little woman in the arms of a third party as you would have felt if you had seen Dot run into the carrier's embrace. It was the most complete, unmitigated, soul-fraught little piece of earnestness that you ever beheld in all your days. You may be sure the carrier was in a state of perfect rapture, and you may be sure that Dot was likewise, and you may be sure they all were, inclusive of Miss Slowboy, who wept copiously for joy, and, wishing to include her young charge in the general interchange of congratulations, handed round the baby to everybody in succession, as if it were something to drink. But now the sound of wheels was heard again outside the door, and somebody exclaimed that Gruff and Tackleton was coming back. Speedily that worthy gentleman appeared, looking warm and flustered. "Why, what the devil's this, John Peerybingle?" said Tackleton. "There's some mistake.